Everybody, welcome back to Q-Tips. We are the Video Store Junkies, and we are back once again to bring you a few selections to watch over the weekend on streaming. And we're going to get right into this, and I'm going to throw this over to Zach.
Thank you so much, Renee. So, we actually just had a little conversation off mic before we started recording that reminded me of a movie that I've kind of been meaning to recommend for a while. Because I watched it a while back. Thought it was kind of interesting, not the most riveting film. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's kind of the least riveting film you'll ever see, which kind of makes it the most riveting film you'll ever see. We were talking about a relic of the bygone era. I'm, of course, talking about the American shopping mall. And it just so happens that someone actually made a movie about a year in the life of a shopping mall called Jasper Mall. That's Jasper, Jasper. Apparently, there was a mall in Jasper, Alabama, that they filmed at, and they basically just kind of followed around the guy who I guess he's the manager of the mall. He's the head of security. He's basically, I guess, does everything at the mall because they can't afford any other employees. So it just kind of follows him around. It is not white knuckled entertainment, but there is something kind of interesting about it. And I think every single American who grew up in the last 50 years has probably some fond memories of going to the mall. And I'm not going to say we all miss them. I mean, I definitely don't necessarily miss the mall. But at the same time, it was probably part of growing up, and you have some nostalgia for it. So, if you're like me and you do have some fond memories, then yeah, maybe check out Jasper Mall and kind of get a look into what a dying mall actually looks like when it's on life support. This one is on Prime Video, the Roku channel, Vudu, Pluto TV, Plex, and apparently something called Filmzy, Filmzie. I swear every single time. We record, literally every week we record, I see a new streaming service on here. But there you go. So if you're a Filmzy subscriber,
Yeah.
this is, I don't know how much content they have on. It might actually just be this one movie, so you might have to watch this. But so yeah, it's very riveting and very boring at the same time. So check it out. And speaking of very riveting and very boring at the same time, Bill, what's your first pick this week?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and you can also find me on Flimsy. Filmzy is a terrible. I realize there are a lot of streaming services and all the good names have been taken, but I would have thought that one through a little bit more. Well, mine is Hammer Films 1974, and that's in other words, Hammer Films dying on the vine. This is a great studio. They made classic stuff, just absolutely some of my favorite movies. By 1974, they were dead men walking. Night of the Living Dead shot them, and The Exorcist put the final nail in the coffin. They just didn't know what to do, but they went out with a couple of. Some of my favorite stuff is Dying Hammer because they're just literally throwing everything against the wall. And this one I feel like could have been a success had it come out a few years earlier. It's Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. And needless to say, yeah, I'm totally there because I love vampire hunter films. That's what Horror of Dracula is. It's who cares about Dracula? It's the vampire hunters. That's true for the original novel, and that's the way it should be. And Captain Kronos was their attempt to create a series with a new hero. It's true, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee were getting a little long in the tooth. They needed some new blood. And they got Horst Janssen, or Jansen, I don't know how you pronounce it. And the plot of this is when several young girls are found dead, left aged and void of blood. So this is a different kind of vampire. It's more of an energy vampire. The local doctor gets his friend, Captain Kronos, vampire hunter, and his hunchback assistant to come and go after this. The assistant is the sage, he knows all the stuff, and Captain Kronos is a good-looking guy with a sword, and he knows how to use it. So, yeah, there you go. I mean, it writes itself. It doesn't completely work because at this point the budgets were getting small. This one really needed that old school Hammer when they were still at Bray Studios, that rich Terence Fisher texture. This was, I can't remember who directed this. It was the only film, Brian Clemens, who was also a writer. I think he wrote this. I think it's the only film he directed. And he acquits himself adequately, but there just isn't enough gas in the tank left. And although Horst is I don't know if he's a great actor or not. He looks good. He fits the role right. He's good with the swashbuckling and all. There is zero chemistry between him and the leading lady. And that's a problem because the leading lady is Carolyn Monroe. Gay men have chemistry with Carolyn Monroe. I mean, this is Carolyn Monroe, 1974. Absolutely ravishingly beautiful. She's still a great looking woman. You're just waiting for something to happen, but and it does, but it doesn't. It looks like it's only there because it's in the script. I mean, there's no enthusiasm going on here at all. But it does give us some cool vampire stuff and a different take on it. There's a scene where they're trying to kill this vampire, and they're trying all the various ways because there's like 20 different kinds of vampires, and there's 20 different ways to kill them, which is kind of a neat thing. I think they could have done a lot with this. Believe it or not, Hammer was under the impression that Captain Kronos was a time traveler. And that was their plan they were going to have Captain Kronos in modern times and ancient times and all kinds of things, which is not a great idea.
Makes sense with the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Basically, he's got a TARDIS. Yeah. And then that would have been interesting. But it didn't make any money at all. If you see the poster, it's like, wow, they did not have a budget. This looks like, it's like Photoshop before Photoshop, or what we used to call bad collage. Things have really gotten cheap. But, like I say, even dying Hammer is still Hammer. So give it a look. It's on Canopy. And it is a lot of fun. It's a good time. And I will throw this over to the lovely Renee.
Well, thank you very much. So, my first recommendation, I really liked the way that IMDb described this, so I'm going to steal this little caption from them. A futuristic, sensitive tale of adventure and confrontation when a 10-year-old boy is accidentally kidnapped by a spaceship filled with a motley crew of space pirates. It's such a great description. This movie is called Space Raiders. It is from 1983, and it is a sci-fi action film. And it is pretty much exactly like they described. This young boy is accidentally kidnapped by these space pirates. He gets on their ship when they're in the middle of some other stuff. They didn't mean to kidnap the kid. There he was. And also, for the fans of Galaxy Quest, I do believe that this was the movie that inspired the aliens. Just so you know, I don't think they were watching Star Trek. I think they were actually watching Space Raiders. Yeah. So, but this movie, it's very 80s. It is got a little cheese. It's very fast paced. It's got laser battles and spaceship, space chases, and the cast is great. It's not a lot of recognizable names. But it's just they do a great job. It holds your attention, which is kind of difficult with a lot of movies now. But it's really fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. And this movie is called Space Raiders, and I believe you can watch that on Tubi. So yeah.
I also sorry, I just want to cut in here and mention that just hearing the description of this film, this is basically a Guardians of the Galaxy prequel. I thought that's what you were going to recommend.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, see, this movie, it inspired a lot of other movies, apparently.
I'm looking at the trailer right now, and one of the aliens is a Ferengi, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Really
I
is.
think I know who you're talking about, yeah.
The kid looks really, really cute and precocious, and I'm pretty sure I would want to have him thrown out an airlock after 10 minutes, but that's the
Definitely.
Goonies lover in me talking.
Yeah. So the kid, right? Now you're probably going to be like, where have I seen this kid before? But he's not really been in a lot of other stuff. What he was in was the Twilight Zone remake, where the episode was called Exam Day. Yes, do you remember?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yes, he was in that wonderful episode of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I really like it. And I think he's still doing some stuff now, obviously, behind the scenes work. So yeah, so that's my recommendation, Space Raiders. And I'll pass this on to Paul.
Why, thank you, Renee. Well, my recommendations are sort of related to yours and Zach's, because it's space and a documentary. It's Apollo 11 from 2019, which would have been the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. It's currently showing on Hulu and Roku TV. I caught this on the big screen when it was out. It's absolutely gorgeous. They took a lot of they took basically footage from the time. There's no real narration. It's all just the archival footage, but it's really cleaned up. And I strongly suspect that like some of the audio is the kind of thing that like Peter Jackson did with his World War One thing, where the audio is recreated, because some of it's really clear and just doesn't seem like it would have been went with the videos. But it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous, just really loving story about Apollo 11 and the moonshot. I'd recommend watching it on the biggest screen you can. Or just sit really close to your phone. So that's Apollo 11 from 2019 on Hulu and Roku TV. And speaking of moonshots, I pass this to Bill.
Oh, geez. Oh, you caught me unawares here. Okay. Hold on. Let me get back where I was. I was just cruising through IMDb. Renee inspired me, and curiously, I think whoever is writing the descriptions must just recycle them, because I'm looking at this description of mine. A futuristic, sensitive tale of adventure and confrontation when a group of young people are kidnapped by some politicians. Motley crew of politicians. Yes, it's Sallow, the 120 Days of Sodom. I'm kidding. I could never get through that thing. Now, 1974, although it may have been made a little bit earlier. To me, this is the last great Hammer film. Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. Why is it the last great one? It's got Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein. And the genius of Hammer is that their Frankenstein movies did not follow the Frankenstein monster. They followed Frankenstein, the actual Dr. Frankenstein, which, all of us smart boys know. The monster was not named Frankenstein, yada, yada, yada. And Dr. Frankenstein is way more interesting. At least he is when he's played by Peter Cushing. And the films do not have a religious consistency of continuity, but there's enough of that you can actually see an overall arc. That Frankenstein started out as this idealistic, though highly amoral scientist who wanted to, defeat death. And in this, the final film, after all his many defeats, his many failures, he is an elderly, insane, crazy person, quite appropriately living in an insane asylum, which he is a patient of and also runs, and still trying to put the monster together. And Cushing is just so good in this. He's wearing the most dreadful wig I've ever seen. It's like he had scalped Helen Hayes and just put her, bloody scalp on top of his own. But he's great in this. He is so good in this. His hands are burned, so when another young doctor who did something and got in trouble is sent there, he takes him and, he's taking care of all the patients. Oh, this guy's a violinist. What lovely hands he has. And then there's some guy who's like a crazy person, just a crazy killer with the strength and basically the body type of, they say a Neanderthal, but he's David Prowse. He's David Prowse in this horrible, full body makeup. It's the most monstrous of all the Hammer Frankenstein monsters. Yeah, that's the one they put the brain into. Why not? Sure. That always works out, Doc. I don't mean to tell the man his business. And there's a beautiful mute girl, and the guy who's the head of the asylum is a sleazebag. It's directed by Terence Fisher. And quite frankly, when I say I'm a Hammer film fan, what I really mean is I am a tremendous fan of Terence Fisher, because he's the one who did most of the really great Hammer films, and the ones he didn't do were made possible by the ones he did do. I love his. He was a great director. Liked to drink, and there would be a whole lot more films from Hammer by Terence Fisher if he hadn't kept getting run over by cars. And yeah, that it's like this was going to be directed by Terrence Fisher, but he was run over by a car and broke both his legs. I mean, that story should happen maybe once in a person's career, but I'm pretty sure with Terrence Fisher, 3 or 4 times, some variation of Now, how does a guy get hit by a car that often? He was a drinker. He was a total lush. This was the last film he did. He did live for a bit longer. Could have gotten some more films out, but they couldn't get insurance on this guy, which is a real shame because I just love his directing style. It's just totally. If you're in film school and they're going to make you do something, write a bunch of stupid, boring stuff, just do the films of Terrence Fisher. He's not well known as much as he should be, so you'll get away with it, and you'll get to watch some great films too. A lot of fun, and just the last shot of the film, to me, is just a brilliant send-off for the whole Frankenstein series. And much more than the Dracula series, where, there was not a whole lot of rhyme or reason. The Frankenstein series really does hold up. Just take horror of Frankenstein and flush it down the toilet, because it doesn't have Cushing, and if it's a Frankenstein Hammer movie that doesn't have Cushing, it ain't worth shit. So you can just ignore that one. Watch all the others, watch them in order, and just pure brilliance. And I send this to Zach.
Thank you, Bill. So it's actually kind of a coincidence. Paul had a documentary about space, and I actually also have a documentary about space, although this is a slightly different type of documentary or slightly different subject. And I have to say, I've actually only watched one episode of this, but it grabbed me. I had to stop because I was getting late. But I'm going to go ahead and hope that there are only 4 episodes. Hopefully, the 3 latter episodes aren't absolute garbage. But so take this with a grain of salt. But so yeah, the name of the documentary is Heaven's Gate: The Cult of Cults.
Oh my.
And it is
Oh, wow.
yeah, exactly. It is a 4-part series on Heaven's Gate, which for I was vaguely familiar because obviously they all it's I believe the largest mass suicide on U.S. soil in 1997, which I was 13, so I remember hearing about it, but it's not something I really knew a whole lot about, or I hadn't apparently there were a lot of stories leading up to that. But for anyone who doesn't know, this was a cult that was founded by 2 people who called themselves T and Doe, and they basically preached this. And I might be actually messing this up a little bit because it's so insane. I feel like I need to go back and rewatch the first episode just because it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around their philosophy or their theology because it's just so crazy. But I guess basically they were going to teach people how to transform into immortal aliens who would get on a spaceship and go to heaven. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But and of course, ultimately they ended up all killing themselves. Although not all of them, because there are former members that they interview who kind of give some insights into what the first episode kind of covers the first couple years, which I guess they kind of started forming the cult in 1975. So there are people who were kind of there early on and kind of got to see how these people were recruiting people into their group. So again, only watched the first episode. Normally I watch a whole series before I recommend it, but this one just seemed really fascinating, really crazy stuff. Again, kind of hard for me to wrap my head around because there's just a lot to digest here. But Heaven's Gate, it's Heaven's Gate: The Cult of Cults. And that is on HBO Max, all 4 episodes. And speaking of people who I suspect are transforming into immortal aliens, I will pass this over to, I don't even know because I think, I'm not going to name names here, but someone named Paul. Oh, God, sorry, I just did it. Messed up the order, and now I actually don't know who needs to go next. So,
I didn't mess up the order. I passed it to the next person who needed it. It goes to Renee.
Okay. Well, then I'll pass it to Renee, if that is your real name.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, but though you did leave out the most important thing is that there were also web developers. So.
Oh, well, that explains a lot.
Well, I'm not to that point yet because I was only in the 70s.
Spoilers.
So, yeah.
Spoiler
Yeah.
alert.
Thanks a lot.
Spoilers.
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Renee. Sorry.
I wonder how it ends.
So, speaking of things you might have a hard time wrapping your head around, so, okay, you guys know that I like movies that are just have a certain flair to them, if you will. I prefer to call them delightfully ridiculous, and this movie is no exception. This movie is a bit of a spoof on the classic sci-fi B-movie genre. It is absurd. There's some equally absurd special effects in this movie, and an equally absurd title. It is called Trail of the Screaming Forehead.
Yay!
Oh, yay!
Yeah. Oh, you've heard of this movie. Oh, good.
Oh, of course, Larry Blamire.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for also telling me how to pronounce that. This movie this movie is full of just clever puns and, a lot of tongue-in-cheek jokes, and it's ridiculous, and it's just funny, and you just laugh through the movie, and it's just sometimes you groan, but it's just great. The cast is great, and you're probably thinking to yourself, the cast, well, who's in this movie? Well, who's not in this movie is more the question. There's now some of these names you might not recognize off the top of your head, but I promise if you saw them, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy. Like Daniel Roebuck, or Brian Howe, or Dick Miller, who also was in Space Raiders. Betty Garrett, Kevin McCarthy, and one Mr. Ray Harryhausen. Had to throw that in. It was only in there for a second. And both of these movies also, I should mention, have just a little teeny tiny dollop of stop motion. So that's my second recommendation. It's called Trail of the Screaming Forehead. And you can watch that, of course, on Tubi. And so I think that's it.
No, you. Me.
Oh.
Me.
Oh, you
Me, I
didn't.
got
Oh,
one
you
more.
didn't. Oh, nope. That's it. Does anyone have anything to sing us
That's
out
it.
with?
Let's sing us out.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, I got one more. I got
so,
another documentary about space.
Okay.
Space,
Okay.
Space, space.
So I'll pass this over to Paul.
Why, thank you, Renee. So, my first one was Apollo 11, and everyone knows that, the last moonshot was Apollo 17, but actually, it wasn't. There was a secret Department of Defense moonshot, Apollo 18, a year later, and something happened, and this film, Apollo 18, from where it was released in 2011, is a footage, one might say found footage, secret footage of the Apollo 18, the last moonshot, and watch it and you'll find out the real reason we haven't gone back.
Ooh.
So, and it's playing on Hulu, Roku, Pluto TV, Shout TV, and Plex. So that's Apollo 18 from 2011, and it's why we haven't gone back to the moon yet, until we go back a couple years from now, and then they'll find out. And I think we are done now.
Yeah.
So what are you going to sing us out with?
Well, I actually had something lined up, but Tale of the Screaming Forehead. Unfortunately, I can't find the lyrics.
Oh.
I can't find the lyrics, but it does kind of go like this. It's Trail of the Screaming Forehead, and then there's something else, and I don't remember what else. I looked, I couldn't find the lyrics.
That's
It had this, they sang it twice too, and it was just.
And that was Larry Blamire's wife.
Oh, was
yeah.
it? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She's also Animalia in the Lost Skeleton movie.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I was trying to find that one. I couldn't find it.
Lost Skeleton of Cadavers.
Yeah, I figured it. It also looked ridiculous. I thought, gotta watch that.
Yeah, so sorry I couldn't. So I'll just I'll do as a bonus. I'll do one that fits with my two. And it would fit if one of you guys had recommended Neon Genesis Evangelion as well. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. I screwed that up already. In other words, hold my hand.
For the weekend of May 12th, Bill recommended Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, available on Hoopla and Canopy, and Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, also available on Hoopla and Canopy. Paul recommended Apollo 11, available on Hulu, the Roku channel, and the History Vault, and Apollo 18, available on Tubi, Pluto, Hulu, and the Roku channel. I recommended Space Raiders, available on Tubi, Freevee, and Pluto, and Trail of the Screaming Forehead, available on Tubi, AMC Plus, and DirecTV. Zachary recommended Jasper Mall, available on Prime Video, the Roku channel, Vudu, and Pluto, and Heaven's Gate, The Cult of Cults, available on HBO Max.
In other words, I love you.
I think you found your niche here. You actually do the bass pretty well there.
Why, thank you.
Yeah, you need to do.
What do you mean, my niche? I mean, you didn't like my singing all along? What?
No, your singing's been dreadful, but I think yeah, you needed to lower it a couple of octaves, and now it's actually.
Somebody once told me it's gonna roll me.
You got to play that 45 at 33, and then it's actually pretty good.
There you go.
Yeah. Now do Old Man River.
Old Man River.
Okay, there you go. We got it.
Old Man River.
Brilliant.